Okay, let's see. All right. You guys know the drill. If the angle looks different, it's because my battery died. And we're in a new position now. Okay. Let's get back to business. Here we go. End of the year. All the things. Hey everybody, it's Audrey and welcome back to Chapter and Converse. Today we're going to talk about all the books that just missed the mark for me in 2020. These are the books that I just didn't like, and some of you are probably going to be mad because I'm probably going to not like some of the books that you love, but I'm going to tell you why they didn't work for me. So let's just get into it. The first two books I'm going to talk about are books that I DNF'd, and I don't even think I talked about these in my wrap-ups because this year has just been a bit of a mess. So the first book is called Hazel House, and this is by Obi Alagweki, and this is going to be a theme with some of the books that I didn't like this year. I just didn't get it. And this is 326 pages. I made it to 135, so I feel like I gave it a very fair shake. And it's supposed to be a thriller mystery. We have a married couple, they live in London, massive fortune, she's a fashion designer, and then there's a body turns up in a hotel room in Barcelona, there's a letter that exposes a dark secret, there's truth, there's treachery, there's intrigue. I mean, it's everything, everything, everything that I think I would love. I was just so confused. So I don't know if anybody's read this, but I was confused in that it's like, here, I opened to it, chapter 5. It was Christmas 1982. I thought that was a flashback. It turns out the book is set in the 80s, but at no point is that referenced in the first 5 chapters of it. And that was just, it just confused me. Like, I don't know why that wasn't established out of the gate, because nothing that happened in the first few chapters made it seem like it couldn't have been set in present day. So that right there confused me. And it just sort of, from there, I don't know if it was a writing style thing. I don't know if it was a mood I was in at the time. It just didn't work for me. So I haven't unhauled it yet because there's a part of me that just feels like maybe this deserves a second shake. But for now, it's a womp womp. So my second DNF is probably going to definitely be super unpopular opinion because I feel like it was beloved on BookTube this year and I was jazzed for it. I don't know if I was just in the wrong frame of mind or it's just not the book for me. The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. You guys, I couldn't get into it. I was doing the audiobook of it. I love vampires. I love Buffy. I love book clubs. I love books. All the things. This should have worked for me. I love Southern Charm on Bravo. Give me some Southern stuff. I don't know if it was, there was like a fairly grotesque scene early on, which shouldn't bother me because I read a lot of dark and twisted stuff and I watch some dark and twisted stuff. I just could not connect with this book. I didn't get it. I didn't like it. I shouldn't say I didn't get it. I got it. I just didn't like it. And I don't think this is a book I'm going to revisit. So I probably got 30% into this book and I just had to call it quits because it wasn't working for me. I was forcing it and life's too short to force a book. So the rest of these books are books that I actually finished all of them. And this was supposed to be in an unhaul, but it kind of wound up in the wrong pile when I was unhauling the rest of my books. And if you haven't seen the unhaul, I'll link it down below. I could tell you all the feelings in it, but it's They All Fall Down by Hazel House. And this is And Then There Were None homage, which I love. It's a trope that I absolutely live for. And it was the writing I didn't totally connect with, I think was part of it. The character, our main character, I didn't really care about her, which is obviously a problem. And when you're doing an isolated mystery where people start dying, you need to kill someone pretty early on, and it took too long to get to the first kill. So that just like, I was waiting for it, and it just took too long. I didn't think it was so twisty. Like, I just wasn't invested in the characters, and I didn't really care when they died, and then it just didn't feel plausible to me with sort of how things came together and just all of it. So it just didn't work for me. I had super high expectations, and I know when you're trying to do an And Then There Were None isolated mystery, guess who's writing an isolated mystery right now and understands that this is not an easy thing to do. It just didn't meet my expectations. And again, another book that I talked about in my November wrap-up, I want to say, is The Holdout by Graham Moore. And I didn't wholeheartedly hate this book, but there were parts of it that I didn't like, and it just didn't meet my expectations. So this to me was a super anticipated 2020 release. I was hearing tons of great things about it. It is about a jury who 10 years ago, they were on like a high profile murder case, sort of OJ level. They were sequestered, except he wasn't a celebrity, but it was like that level. They're also in LA, and they did not convict him. And after the trial was over and they re-enter the world, they find out that like the whole world is basically super mad at them for not convicting this guy. And 10 years later, the jury is brought back together for like a true crime TV show. They're all brought to the same hotel that they stayed in when they were sequestered. They're all in the same rooms, and then somebody dies. And I just loved that premise. But then I thought they were going to be sequestered in the hotel like the entire time, but they're not. And then it becomes our main character, Maya's quest to find out who done it. And she's an attorney, and I didn't hate that part of it, the fact that she was trying to figure out who did it, but I wish they were sequestered the whole time. Clearly, I want an isolated mystery. And in her quest to find out who done it, she has to drive to a lot of places. And I found the driving to be so boring / annoying / too much of her. Like, she just wasn't interacting with people. And then you get flashbacks, which I love, and multiple POVs, which I love, but there were 12 jurors, and it was really hard to keep everybody straight and connect with all of them and remember who was who. So I was also reading this during National Novel Writing Month, so maybe I wasn't wholly into it, but either way, I still found that whole middle driving all over the state, and like, again, I think she went to like Nevada and some other places too. It just took me out of the story and didn't work for me. So maybe I should write a book where they're sequestered in a hotel and somebody dies and they all have to stay there, because that's what I want. I want sequestered people dying and figuring out what happened. So we need to talk about True Story by Kate Petty Reed. And this was a book that I was also really excited for. And there were parts of it that I enjoyed, but as a whole, it made me really, really angry. And I feel like the more distance I have between me and this book and the more I think about it, the more enraged I get. And I read this in August. I did a whole Goodreads review of this one, and I will link my Goodreads stuff down below if you guys want to read it, like spoilers and all. And this book, again, all the things that I want from a book. We have multiple timelines, we have multiple perspectives. In this one, we have teenage lacrosse players in, I want to say like the mid-90s. They are the most beloved thing in town, very Bear Townish in that way. The town lives and dies for these boys. They can do no wrong. And of course they do tons of stuff wrong, and it all is always forgiven. And there is a party one night, and a girl is sexually assaulted. And she has no memory of what happened to her, and she only knows what she is told the next day. And this book is supposed to be the aftermath of that night and that event and how it impacts the people who were directly involved in it. And I was prepared for a Bear Townish type of story. And I don't want to read the same story twice, so I don't mean it that way. But in the sense of a town divided, these just high school athletes that, again, can do no wrong. And this girl coping with what happened to her, but not even remembering what happened to her, and trying to piece together her life based on what people are telling her. And this story started here, and then it was sort of like, it went fever dream. I can't. There was some body horror, which I wasn't even sure if it was fake or real, and eventually I found out it actually happened. It wasn't a dream weird sequence, because it felt like a weird dream sequence. And I give credit to the author for trying a whole bunch of different things, because there is like straight up story, there is fever dream, there is, I want to say they did like text messages and that type of a thing, there are emails, there's like a screenplay-ish type of vibe to it. So she experiments, there's we go through one of the characters writing their college essays and doing it like over and over and over again. And it's different degrees of, this is what they want to hear, this is what I really want to say. I thought it was interestingly done. So props to the author for being super creative and trying a whole bunch of things. But as a whole, all of that stuff just didn't sit with me. Like it was so confusing. Like I felt like I was reading like 6 different books, but ultimately what I hated was the ending. And the reveal of going back to that night and what happened just gave me so much rage. So if you don't want to know what, I'll put a little spoiler card up. But the reason why this is on this list, we come to find out at the end of the book, this girl has spent her entire life. So I want to say we fast forward like 20 years to present day. So she goes to a party with her friends, gets super drunk, doesn't remember anything, and finds out the next morning, because it's all anybody's talking about, that these 2 guys in the backseat of their friend's car while they were driving her home sexually assaulted her, bragged about it, and then dumped her on her parents' front porch and walked away and left her drunk and assaulted. And she lives her entire life with the fact that this has happened to her, and it has shaped her entire existence. And then we find out in the end that it never actually happened. And they just made it up. So she was super drunk. They drove her home. They left her on the front porch, but she was never actually assaulted. And to me, this discredits anyone who comes forward about a sexual assault, who is brave enough to report this, is brave enough to talk about it, who has to cope with the fact that they were at a party one night and they were assaulted, and lives their entire life with that reality. And then we come to find out it was all just made up and it was a lie. So I don't know what the author's intent was with this, but I think it just discredits anyone. And I think this is so disrespectful to anyone who has been sexually assaulted or who has gone through this, by being what felt very blasé about it and being like, oh, you know what, that was just a rumor. And nothing ever happened to the boys, which was not the shocking part. To me, that felt like some reality. And that didn't make it any more or any less disturbing, but it didn't surprise me that the super jocks and the prize athletes weren't punished for what they did. But what completely made me angry, grossed me out, and kind of made me want to throw the book across the room was that it was all just, haha, it was just a stupid rumor that we made up, and we actually never did anything to you, and you were never raped, and you were never assaulted, and you have spent your entire life trying to come to terms with a night that you cannot remember, and it actually never happened. So, not for nothing, but like, what was the point of the book? Because it just, to me, did so much harm to anyone who has been in that situation, and it just really pissed me off. So yeah, that's why this one's on the list. Another book that made me feel really stupid is Katherine House by Elizabeth Thomas. So this is another book I've talked about. I was super excited for this one. It's like a weird quasi boarding school, college, 3-year, people are randomly selected and it's all paid for, and you're sequestered on the campus, and it's like super weird and creepy, and nobody in town knows what goes on behind these gates. But when you come out of it, you're basically set for life, and you can be in the Senate or a super famous artist, or, you know, a writer, government connections. Like, it sounds like secret society-ish. Love, 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 love. I didn't get it. I feel like I was just too stupid for this book. It feels a little fever dreamy, which happened in a couple books accidentally, or I didn't mean to pick them up with fever. Anyway, there were fever dream aspects to books that I wasn't aware of, and I feel like I'm not a fever dream person. And there were parts that I enjoyed, but I feel like I just didn't get the writing style and the point of all of it. So it's a beautiful book, so I kind of don't want to unhaul it. Maybe it'll make sense when it's not 2020. I don't know. My brain just didn't get this one at all. The next book I did an entire video on, so if you want to hear all the thoughts and feelings about it, I will link it for you down below. And it is The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins. And this is the prequel to the Hunger Games series. This is the President Snow origin story. This is nothing I needed in life, but I was super curious about it. So I listened to the audiobook from the library, and the audiobook objectively was well done. The story itself, meh. Not my thing, not my thing. And I think part of it was this really a story that needed to be told? I don't think it was. So this book takes place at the 10th Hunger Games, and it is the first time they're mentors, and Snow is a mentor to a girl from District 12, which is where Katniss is from. So I think we all knew the writing was on the wall of what was gonna happen here. Something wasn't gonna go right. It's kind of what built up all of his hate and resentment against District 12 in particular. And well, theoretically, he's a decent dude at the time. Something happens that turns him evil. And it just wasn't a compelling story to me. And I will say I really enjoyed Sejanus. I really enjoyed, I'm blanking on her name, his cousin, who's the cat. His cousin Tigress. And what I did enjoy was that at the 10th Annual Hunger Games, the Capitol is basically in bad-ass shape. So it is run down, people are basically starving and dying on the streets, things are not good. And Snow does not have a lot of money, his family does not have a lot of money, and people are just trying to hold it all together. And they are trying to use the games as a way to bring money and revenue and attention and wealth back to the Capitol. So I enjoyed that part of it, and I wish there was more of it, to see how the games went from literally they just put all the kids in a stadium and just like barely even gave them weapons. They just destroyed each other literally, to the high octane, just incredible games that they became, even though it was still the horrible thing that the kids are killing each other, but obviously it was a very impressively done thing by the time Katniss got to it. So I enjoyed seeing sort of the early seeds of what got them to what it was going to be. So I thought that was very interesting. I just think it would have been more interesting to see Tigress's story or Cinna's story, who was Lenny Kravitz in the movies, who I loved. And like, I just didn't care about Snow. I didn't care why he maybe was kind of sort of not a terrible person and then became like a horrible human being, because we all know he became horrible. I just didn't love it. And I didn't think I was going to, and shocker, I didn't. The next book is The Last Time I Saw You by Liv Constantine, and that is the sister duo Lynn and Valerie Constantine, who wrote The Last Mrs. Parrish, which I loved. And I kind of think that they might, I hate to say this, be a little one-hit wonder, or maybe it's just second book slump, but this book really missed the mark for me. And I had listened to a bunch of podcasts with them talking about this book, and they talked about how they really struggled with writing this book and how they wound up changing the ending late in the game, and it had like a different murderer at the beginning, and I feel like you really got that reading the book. And I say this with no shade, and I say this with no shade about any of the books. As someone who is a writer aspiring to be published, I get it. It is hard, and it is, I am trying to write thrillers. It is hard to write mysteries and twists and red herrings and keep people on the edge of their seats and keep things hidden and have people guessing. All of it I understand. I just didn't connect with this book. There were things that were supposed to be creepy that I didn't think were creepy. And it is, the premise of this is a girl, her mom dies. She is killed in a burglary at their house. They're not sure who did it. And it's like this very rich, wealthy family down south. And then one of the best friends of our main character, who they grew up together, they went to school together, but they had a falling out in their early 20s, comes back for the funeral, and they haven't seen each other in a long time. And she kind of helps her through coping with her mother's murder. I just didn't totally connect with the characters. We had multiple timelines, which I liked. We had multiple POVs, which I liked. It felt kind of thrown together. It felt kind of choppy to me. It felt a little ridiculous at times to me, especially with some of the things that were supposed to be creepy. And it basically just didn't. So I haven't completely written them off, but I also am not chomping at the bit to read their next book. Another writing duo that I'm also bummed me out this year is Greer Hendricks and Sarah Pekkanen, and their newest book, You Are Not Alone. And this was another book that I was so ready for it and excited for it, and I loved The Wife Between Us. I think that was just a brilliant, brilliant book. And I didn't dislike An Anonymous Girl, which was their second book. I thought it was a solid second effort, not as good as the first, but this one to me really didn't hit its stride at any point. And in this one, we have a girl named Shay who was down on the subway platform, and she's kind of just, she's having a rough time of things. Her roommate, who's a guy who she's kind of quasi in love with, has a girlfriend, and the girlfriend's moving in, so she has to move out. And her job's not going great, and she's a statistician, which plays a part in the book, which is why I'm mentioning it. And she doesn't really have any friends, and she just is kind of feeling not so good about herself. And she's on the subway platform on a Sunday morning, and then she sees a woman jump in front of a train. And Shay has this moment of, that could have been me. Partially because they, wait for it, kind of look like each other. And partially because she's like, how bad does it have to be that you throw yourself in front of the train? And I don't want to become that woman. So she becomes oddly obsessed with the woman, winds up going to her wake to meet the woman's friend and sort of to pay her respect. But then she sort of twists a lie and tells the friends that she knew the woman, which she didn't, but then sort of inserts herself into that woman's life. So it all sounded promising to me. And I know this sounds like a convoluted story. It sounded very promising to me, but it just didn't hold up for me. And the twists and the turns, some things felt super obvious to me. Some things felt a little preposterous to me. There were a few points towards the end with some of the reveals that I really enjoyed, that I was like, yes, this is good stuff. But there were some things that felt really obvious to me throughout the book. And like I could see the clues being laid out with some things, and it's not because I'm super genius. I feel like they were just a little bit obvious. And because this woman is a statistician, she talks about everything in stats a lot. And like at the beginning, it was fine, like the first couple chapters, but it just went the whole book and it just started to grate on my nerves. But it could be because the book was grating on my nerves. Again, I haven't totally written them off, but this was a miss for me too. And again, I think my expectations were really high, so it missed the bar. And also the story just didn't totally work for me. Another fever dream book that I could have done without was Sisters by Daisy Johnson. And I was excited for this book too, you guys. And I think that's why a lot of these books were a disappointment to me, is because the premise sounded so exciting, or they were authors that I really enjoyed, and the books themselves just weren't what I wanted them to be or hoped they would be. And I talked about this pretty recently, so I will link that review for you guys down below also. But this was about two sisters named, I want to say June and September, which are the months they were born in. And there's an incident at school. They're juniors or seniors in high school, and they basically have to kind of get out of town. So their mom, single mom, takes them out of town. They go to the cabin, their father's cabin. So their father passed away years ago, and they're kind of isolated. And the mom basically goes up to her bedroom and hides out, and we kind of don't see the mom at all. So mom's got some issues going on, and we just see the two sisters over, I don't even know if it's the course of like a couple weeks, if that. And we get the unfolding of what happened that led them to having to be sort of, they're not on the run, they just needed to like get out of town. And I knew the twist pretty early on. I figured out the what was what, and I just didn't enjoy it. And I think part of it was the writing style. Again, it was written sort of in that fever dreamy way, and it's just not, it's not my kind of writing, not my kind of storytelling. And I just didn't like the story. And again, I didn't really connect with the characters. I didn't really care about them. I was super curious about it, so I stuck with it till the end, but it just didn't work for me. And I'm not hearing anybody else talking about this. So again, I don't know if this is a me thing or if this was just, not that it matters if it was the book or not. It just didn't do it for me. None of these books did. So I don't know why I keep saying that. The next book is The Girls' Weekend by Jody Gurman. And this was another one I was super excited for. Isolated mystery, friends from college with old resentments. It all comes out during a weekend of boozing. and partying and blacking out, and they wake up to blood on the wall and one of the girls missing. I love it. I love everything about this. This has hit written all over it for me. And it just was not a hit for me. So part of it was, I think the main character felt a lot too wishy-washy for me. She wasn't engaging enough. She wasn't strong enough for me. I just was, it felt stereotypical with like the womp womp main character. She needed a backbone. And she had one of the girls who, there's 4 of them in the group, 4 or 5 of them. And kind of her best gal pal, who convinces her to come to the girls' weekend, was great. She was strong, she was fierce, she had her own pile of problems, which I love, but she was more dynamic. I think she would have been a better main character. Like, our main character was just such a wuss. I kind of didn't care, and I wanted to just be like, get it together. Her rival is the one who's throwing the party, and her rival is the writer she always wanted to be. She's super rich. She's got like this big book series that came out. They have this stunning, beautiful home, isolated, of course, because it's an isolated mystery. And she married the guy that our main character wanted to marry. So she's all the things our main character ever wanted to be. And it just felt too stereotypical to me. Like, they felt like cookie cutter characters to me, those two. So I think if the other best friend had been the main character, it would have been more intriguing. But isolated mystery, one of them goes missing. They had done a whole bunch of drinking and drugs the night before. Nobody remembers what the heck happened. I'm not mad about that part of it. The husband's there. There's a groundskeeper that's there. There's teenage kids that are there. So there's a whole mess of suspects. It's all the things I love. But I didn't love the story. I didn't love the reveal of it all. And I just couldn't connect with our main characters, so I just didn't care what happened to them. And again, I feel like that's a theme too. When you're not connecting with the characters, the book just probably isn't going to work for you, and that was the case with this one. The next up is a YA mystery, and it's called The Last to Die by Kelly Garrett. And this was another one that I thought was going to be completely up my alley. And you have a group of kind of spoiled, kind of rich kids in some affluent suburb somewhere, and they're kind of bored with being rich and fabulous, and they break into people's houses in the neighborhood, kind of to get their kicks. And then somebody dies. There's a dead body, and it's one of the houses that they broke into. So, wah, wah, wah. Sounds really exciting. It was not. It was not. This was super short. I listened to the audiobook of it. Nothing was suspenseful. Again, some cookie cutter characters. Say that 5 times fast, or 2. And the story just never took off for me. And the end was just so ridiculous. It was like soap opera Lifetime Movie Network level ridiculous. And I can suspend some disbelief, and I can go down a, like, give me a Tori Spelling Lifetime Mother May I Sleep with Danger movie any day of the week. But not with this. This was just not, no. If there's a chance that you were interested in reading this, save yourself the time and don't bother, because it wasn't worth it. I feel so much better now that I have my rage off my chest. But let me know if you guys have read any of these books and you liked them. Tell me about it. Let me know what your least favorite book of the year was. I clearly am in the midst of doing my 2020 best, worst, hindsight, all those types of videos. So if you want to see more of them, make sure you hit that little bell down below. And if you're not already subscribed, do the subscribe and the bell. And like this video if you like these kinds of videos. It really does help me, and I do really appreciate it. So thank you guys again so much for watching, hanging out, doing all the things, and I will see you really soon in the next video. Bye everybody.